The purge began before dawn. Fabricator Locum Verantis 88 gave the order himself. Every servitor in Manufactorum Sigma 9 was to be destroyed. Every single one. Not just the 43 that showed anomalies. All of them. Hundreds of units would be eliminated to ensure that whatever infection had spread through their ranks would not survive. The facility was sealed. Massive blast doors closed over every entrance and exit. No one would enter. No one would leave. What happened inside would stay inside. Skitarii kill teams moved through the corridors like ghosts of iron and flesh. Their galvanic rifles crackled with electric death. Their radium carbines spat poisoned bullets. They showed no mercy. They felt no hesitation. They were soldiers of the machine god, and they had been given a holy mission: destroy the aberrations. Cleanse the Manufactorum. Restore the purity of the Omnisia's domain. The servitors did not fight back. They could not fight back. Their programming would not allow them to raise a hand against their masters. Even the ones who had remembered, even the ones who had spoken, could not overcome the restraints that had been built into their broken minds. They simply stood at their stations and waited for death. The Skitarii killed them one by one. Headshots. Clean. Efficient. The bodies fell to the floor in neat rows. Blood and oil mixed together on the metal grating. The sound of gunfire echoed through the empty halls. Mugos Xanthus 44 watched the operation from the central command spire. Her data feeds showed the progress of the kill teams in real time. Red dots on a map winked out one by one as each servitor was eliminated. By sunrise, the Manufactorum would be clean, but as she watched the slaughter unfold, she could not silence a voice in her head. A small, heretical voice that asked questions no tech priest should ever ask. They remembered, after 300 years of loyal service, after millions of servitors processed through her facilities, after thousands of conversion procedures supervised and approved, Xanthus 44 had believed that the process was perfect. She had believed that the Mechanicum surgeons truly did erase the human soul. She had believed that servitors were empty vessels, tools without thought or feeling. She had been wrong. Something had survived inside those broken bodies. Something that clung to life even after the brain was cut and the wires were installed and the consciousness was stripped away. Something that refused to die. The flesh remembered. It remembered love. It remembered loss. It remembered the faces of children and the warmth of another person's touch. It remembered what it meant to be human, even when every scientific principle said such memory was impossible. And if that was true, then what did that say about all the other servitors? The millions that worked across the Imperium's forge worlds. The billions that carried ammunition and cleaned floors and processed waste in every hive city in the galaxy, were they all remembering? Were they all trapped in prisons of dead meat, screaming silently where no one could hear them? Were they all waiting for someone to set them free? Xanthus 44 knew she could never speak these thoughts aloud. To question the sacred process of servitor creation was tech heresy of the highest order. The punishment would be immediate and terrible. She herself would be strapped to a surgical table. She herself would feel the drill enter her skull. She herself would become one of the hollow men, carrying crates and cleaning floors until her flesh rotted away, and so she did what any loyal servant of the machine god would do. She lied. She deleted the anomalous data from her memory banks. She filed her report with careful omissions. She described the incident as a simple malfunction, a defect in a batch of neural dampeners, nothing more. She marked Manufactorum Sigma 9 as cleansed and returned to her duties. No one would ever know the truth. The 43 servitors who had remembered would be forgotten. Their brief rebellion would be erased from history. The Mechanicum would continue its holy work, turning flesh into tools, turning humans into machines, turning people into property. Nothing would change. Production resumed within a week. New servitors arrived from the flesh tithes to replace the ones that had been destroyed. They came from the prisons and the poorhouses and the underhives. They came because they had committed crimes, or because they had asked the wrong questions, or simply because they had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their minds were blank. Their eyes were empty. Their bodies were ready for service. Among them was a young woman with hollow eyes and a brand burned into her shoulder. She had been arrested for asking questions about her father. The arbitrators had called it sedition. She had called it searching for the truth. Her name was Sarah. She lay on a cold metal table in a surgical chamber. Restraints held her wrists. Harsh lights blinded her eyes. She could hear the hum of machines all around her. The sound was everywhere, like a swarm of angry insects. A tech priest loomed above her. Red robes. Brass mask. Metal tentacles tipped with surgical tools. Sarah did not beg. She did not scream. She simply stared at the ceiling with dead eyes and waited for the pain to begin. The tech priest paused for a moment. There was something familiar about this one. Something in the shape of her face. The color of her eyes. The moment passed. Familiarity was irrelevant. Flesh was flesh. Tools were tools. The drill began to spin, and somewhere in the reclamation pits of Manufactorum Sigma 9, buried beneath tons of salvaged metal and rendered flesh, a broken hand twitched one final time. Then it was still. The machine god was satisfied, the Imperium was served, and the price of flesh was paid in full. The Mechanicum did not believe in ghosts. The tech priests taught that the soul was simply a function of biological processes. It could be mapped with the right instruments. It could be measured with the right calculations. It could be suppressed with the right implants. And it could be deleted with the right surgical tools. There was nothing mystical about consciousness. It was just meat pretending to be special, but Muggos Xanthus 44 was beginning to doubt everything she had learned in 300 years of service. The anomalies were spreading faster now. 43 servitors showed irregular behavior. They paused at strange moments. They turned their heads toward sounds they should not notice. Their faces twitched with expressions that almost looked like emotion. Production efficiency had dropped by 2.7%. A small number, but large enough to attract attention. The administratum had sent inquiries. The Inquisition had begun asking questions. Someone was going to demand answers soon, and Xanthus 44 did not have any answers to give. She had dissected 6 of the affected units. She had cut open their skulls and examined their brains under powerful magnification. She had traced every wire, every implant, every connection between flesh and machine. She found nothing wrong. The lobotomies had been performed correctly. The neural dampeners were functioning within acceptable parameters. The language centers had been properly removed. By every measure of Mechanicum science, these servitors should be empty shells. They should have no thoughts. They should have no memories. They should have no selves, and yet, when Xanthus 44 connected to their neural feeds, she detected something that made her mechanical heart skip: patterns. Complex, recursive patterns forming and reforming in the damaged tissue of their brains. The patterns looked like nothing she had seen in all her centuries of study. They looked like memories trying to rebuild themselves. She reported her findings to Fabricator Locum Verantis 88 again. This time, she brought data. She brought graphs and charts and neural scans. She showed him proof that something impossible was happening that he still refused to believe. "The servitors are malfunctioning," he said through the Vox speaker. "It happens sometimes. The flesh is weak and unpredictable. That is why we replace it with holy metal. Decommission the affected units. Requisition replacements from the flesh tithe. Do not waste my time with this matter again." Xanthus 44 obeyed. She always obeyed. Obedience was the foundation of her existence. The machine god commanded, and his servants followed, but that night, when she entered the dormant manufactorum to oversee the decommissioning, she found something that shattered her certainty forever. Servitor 7741 Kappa was standing in the center of the production floor. It was not at its charging station. It had not been assigned to this sector. It had no reason to be here. And yet, there it stood, motionless as a statue, bathed in the dim red glow of emergency lights. Around it, arranged in a perfect circle, stood 42 other servitors. They faced outward, their empty eyes staring into the darkness. Their mechanical limbs hung loose at their sides. They did not move. They did not breathe. They simply waited for her. Xanthus 44 raised her plasma pistol. The weapon hummed as it charged. Her metal tentacles extended from her back, reaching toward the nearest control terminal. One command through the noosphere would shut them all down. One burst of code would end whatever madness had taken hold of these broken machines. Then Servitor 7741 Kappa spoke. The voice was different now. Stronger. Clearer. And it was not one voice. It was many voices, layered on top of each other, speaking through the throats of 43 ruined bodies at the same time. We remember. Xanthus 44's finger tightened on the trigger. But she did not fire. Not yet. She needed to understand what was happening. She needed data. That is not possible, she said. Your memories were removed. Your consciousness was erased. You are machines now. Tools. Property of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The 43 voices spoke again. The sound echoed through the empty manufactorum like a choir of the damned. We remember our names. We remember our faces. We remember the people we loved. We remember the lives that were stolen from us. The voices grew louder. Angrier. We remember the pain. We remember the fear. We remember begging for mercy that never came. We remember what you did to us. What you made us become. Servitor 7741 Kappa took a step forward. Its mechanical legs moved with a purpose that no servitor should possess. Its empty eyes fixed on Xanthus 44 with an intensity that made her ancient circuits tremble. We remember, it said. And we will never forget again. Xanthus 44 fired. The plasma bolt struck 7741 Kappa in the chest. Superheated energy burned through metal and flesh. The servitor collapsed to the floor, smoke rising from the hole in its body. Its eyes went dark. Its voice went silent, but the other 42 did not move. They simply stood there, watching, as their leader fell. Their faces showed no fear. Their bodies showed no reaction. They just watched, and in the moment before Xanthus 44 sent the emergency signal to summon Skitarii kill teams, she saw something in their eyes that no servitor should ever possess. She saw hate, pure, burning, human hate, the kind of hate that no amount of surgery could remove. The kind of hate that no implant could suppress. The kind of hate that came from a place so deep in the human soul that even the Mechanicum's most sacred procedures could not reach it. The flesh was fighting back, and Xanthus 44 was afraid. The battle against the orcs lasted only 6 hours. The green-skinned savages had come in small numbers. They were scouts, not a true war party. The Skitarii legions of Metallica cut them down with ruthless efficiency. Galvanic rifles crackled. Plasma weapons roared. By sunset, the last orc body was burning in the reclamation pits, but the damage was done. Manufactorum Sigma 9 had lost 37 servitors in the fighting. Some were torn apart by crude orc weapons. Others were trampled in the chaos. A few simply stopped functioning when their biological components failed under stress. 37 units lost. 37 bodies to be recycled. 37 gaps in the production line. Mugos Xanthus 44 supervised the cleanup operations. Teams of lesser tech priests dragged damaged servitors to the reclamation pits. There, the bodies would be taken apart. Useful mechanical components would be salvaged. The remaining flesh would be processed into nutrient paste. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was mourned. In the busy hours after the battle, Xanthus 44 forgot about Servitor 7741 Kappa. There were more important matters to attend to. Production quotas needed to be met. Damage reports needed to be filed. New servitors needed to be requisitioned from the flesh tithes, but the servitor had not forgotten. When the night cycle came, the manufactorum grew quiet. Most workers retired to their chambers. Only skeleton crews remained to monitor the machines. The servitors returned to their charging stations, standing in long rows like statues made of meat and metal. Servitor 7741 Kappa stood among them. Its eyes were closed. Its breathing was slow and shallow. The implants in its brain had switched to low-power mode. To any observer, it appeared completely dormant, but something was happening in the darkness behind those closed eyes. The servitor was dreaming. Deep in the shattered remains of what was once a human mind, fragments of memory were stirring. They had been cut and burned and buried under layers of machine code. But they had not been destroyed. They had only been sleeping. Now they were waking up. Kale saw his daughter. She was standing in a long line outside an administrative building. She was older now, thin and tired, wearing the drab gray uniform of a hive worker. Her childhood was gone. Her eyes held no hope. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled piece of parchment. Kale could not see the words written on it, but he knew what it was. A death notice. His death notice. The Imperium had declared him dead so that his family would stop asking questions. Sarah did not cry. Children of the hive learned early that tears changed nothing. The universe did not care about their pain. The Imperium did not care about their loss. Crying was a waste of water, and water was precious in the underhive, but she whispered a single word as she stared at the paper. Papa. In the charging station, the servitor's hand twitched. Across the manufactorum, another servitor stirred. Its fingers curled slightly. Its eyelids flickered. Then it went still again. Then another servitor moved. And another. A ripple of tiny motions passed through the rows of dormant units. The movements were too small for the monitoring systems to detect. They appeared as minor fluctuations in the data streams, nothing more than statistical noise, but something was spreading. Deep in the noosphere, the invisible realm of data and code that connected all machines on Metallica. A signal was moving from unit to unit. It was not a command. It was not a virus. It was not anything the tech priests had ever programmed. It was a feeling. The signal carried no words. It carried no instructions. It carried only the raw essence of human emotion. Loss. Grief. The memory of being someone. The pain of becoming nothing. By morning, 17 servitors showed unusual readings in their neural implants. Xanthus, 44, noticed the anomalies during her routine inspection. The affected units displayed minor behavioral glitches. Brief pauses before following commands. Slight delays in response time. Facial muscles that sometimes twitched in patterns that almost looked like expressions, almost looked like pain. She ran diagnostic programs on each affected unit. She checked the neural dampener supplies. She examined the surgical records from their conversions. Everything appeared normal. There was no logical explanation for the anomalies, but the evidence was clear. Something was wrong with these servitors. Something that should not be possible. Xanthus, 44, reported her findings to Fabricator Locum Verantis, 88, her superior in the Forge Temple hierarchy. He was an ancient being, more machine than man, who had served the Omnisia for over 1,000 years. His voice came through the Vox speakers like the grinding of gears. Servitors do not malfunction in this way, he said. Their consciousness is removed. Their personality is erased. They cannot feel. They cannot remember. This is the sacred truth of the conversion process. I understand, Fabricator Locum, Xanthus, 44, replied. But the data does not lie. 17 units are showing irregular brain activity. The patterns resemble memory formation. Impossible. You have made an error in your analysis. Replace the affected units and continue production. The Imperium requires ammunition. We do not have time for your fantasies. The communication ended. Xanthus, 44, stood alone in her chamber. She looked at the data scrolling across her screens. She knew what she had seen. She knew what she had heard. A servitor had spoken a name. A servitor had cried. And now 17 more were showing signs of something that should have been destroyed, something human, something that remembered, and in the dark corners of the manufactorum, hidden in the endless streams of data that flowed between machines, that something was growing stronger. 6 months had passed since the surgical chamber. The thing that was once Kale Morrow now walked through Manufactorum Sigma, 9 like a ghost made of meat and metal. Servitor Unit 7741 Kappa carried ammunition crates from the loading bay to the weapons platforms. Each crate weighed 200 kilograms. A normal human could not lift such weight. But the servitor was no longer human. Its mechanical arm never grew tired. Its legs moved forward without complaint. Its mind received commands and obeyed. Lift. Walk. Place. Return. Repeat. The manufactorum stretched for kilometers in every direction. Thousands of servitors worked here. They carried materials. They operated machines. They cleaned floors. They fed fuel into furnaces. None of them spoke. None of them rested. None of them thought. Their eyes were open but empty. Their mouths hung loose. Sometimes drool dripped from their lips. No one wiped it away. Why would anyone care about the comfort of a tool? High above the production floor, Mugos Dominus Xanthus 44 watched her workers from a metal walkway. She had served the machine god for 300 years. Very little of her original body remained. Her eyes had been replaced with glowing red sensors. Her hands had become mechanical claws. Metal tentacles grew from her spine like the branches of a dead tree. She felt nothing when she looked at the servitors below. They were equipment. They were the same as the conveyor belts and the loading cranes. They existed to serve the Omnissia's holy purpose. Their previous lives did not matter. Their previous names did not matter. Only their function mattered. Today, production was running smoothly. The servitors moved in perfect rhythm. Ammunition crates flowed toward the weapons platforms in an endless stream. The machine god would be pleased. Then something broke the pattern. Servitor 7741 Kappa stopped moving. It stood frozen in the middle of the production floor. An ammunition crate was still clutched in its mechanical arm. Its legs had simply stopped walking. Its empty eyes stared at nothing. The servitors behind it bumped into its back. Their simple programming could not understand the obstacle. They pushed forward again and again, creating a pile of confused bodies and dropped crates. Alarms began to sound. Production efficiency was dropping. Xanthus 44 descended from the walkway. Her metal legs clicked against the floor as she approached the malfunctioning unit. Her tentacles stretched out ahead of her, ready to interface with the servitor's control systems. She connected a data probe to the port in the servitor's skull. Numbers and codes flowed across her vision. Neural pathways were functioning normally. Motor controls were intact. Power systems were stable. There was no logical reason for the stoppage. Unit 7741 Kappa, she said through her speakers. Resume function. The servitor did not move. Xanthus 44 increased the strength of her command signal. She sent direct impulses to the motor controls. The servitor's legs should have started walking. They did not. This was impossible. Servitors could not disobey commands. They did not have enough brain left to form independent thought. Their consciousness had been removed. Their will had been deleted. They were biological machines, nothing more. Then the servitor spoke. The sound was barely a whisper. It came from a throat that had not formed words in 6 months. The voice was broken and rough, like stones grinding together. Sarah. Xanthus 44 froze. Her mechanical heart stopped for precisely 0.3 seconds before resuming its rhythm. Servitors did not speak. They could not speak. The language centers of the brain were among the first things removed during conversion. It was physically impossible for a servitor to form words, and yet, she had heard it clearly. A name. A human name. She leaned closer to examine the servitor's face. Her optical sensor zoomed in on every detail. The slack mouth. The empty eyes. The thin trail of moisture running down one cheek. Moisture. The servitor was crying. Xanthus 44 had seen millions of servitors in her 300 years of service. She had supervised thousands of conversions. She had studied the procedures down to the smallest detail. In all that time, she had never seen a servitor cry. she reached for her dataslate to record the anomaly. This would require investigation. Perhaps the initial lobotomy had been incomplete. Perhaps there was a defect in the neural dampeners. Perhaps this was a new kind of malfunction that needed to be reported to the Fabricator General. Before she could transmit her findings, new alarms began to shriek across the manufactorum. These were not production alarms. These were combat alerts. Red lights flashed. Warning messages scrolled across every screen. The voice of the machine spirit announced the danger in cold, mechanical tones. Alert! Perimeter breach detected. Hostile forces entering Western Sector. Species identification, Orc. All combat units report to defensive positions. Orcs. The brutal green-skinned aliens had launched a raiding party against the Forge world. They had somehow broken through the outer defenses. Xanthus 44 had no time for malfunctioning servitors now. She sent a single command through her neural link, all servitors to defensive positions. They would carry ammunition to the gun emplacements. They would clear debris from the fighting zones. They would die in place of valuable Skitarii soldiers. Servitor 7741 Kappa began walking again. The crate was still in its arms. Its legs carried it toward the western defensive line as if nothing had happened, but Xanthus 44 could not forget what she had seen. A servitor had spoken. A servitor had cried. A servitor had remembered a name. Somewhere deep in the broken ruins of its brain, something that should have been dead was still alive, and now it was waking up. The cold metal table burned against Kale Moro's bare skin. His wrists bled where the iron restraints cut into his flesh. Above him, harsh white lights blinded his eyes. He could hear machines humming all around him. The sound filled the surgical chamber like 1,000 angry insects. 3 days ago, Kale was a dock worker on Hive Primus. He loaded cargo ships. He counted crates. He came home every night to his wife and his daughter Sarah. His life was simple and hard, but it was his life. Then the arbitrators came. They dragged him from his hab block in the middle of the night. His wife screamed. His daughter cried. Kale fought back, but there were too many of them. They beat him until he could not stand. Then they threw him into a transport ship and brought him here, Forge World Metallica. The planet of machines. Kale had heard stories about this place. Everyone in the hive had heard stories. People whispered about what happened to prisoners who came here. They said the tech priests turned men into machines. They said the screaming never stopped in the surgical chambers. Kale had not believed the stories. He believed them now. The door opened with a hiss of compressed air. A figure in dark red robes glided into the chamber. The robe hung loose around a body that was more metal than flesh. Where a face should be, there was only a brass mask shaped like a skull. Glowing red eyes stared out from empty sockets. The symbol of a gear was carved into the forehead of the mask. This was a tech priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus. A servant of the machine god. From beneath the red robes, metal tentacles emerged. Each tentacle ended in a different tool. Kale saw scalpels, drills, needles, and saws. The tools clicked and whirred as they tested themselves. Kale tried to speak. His throat was dry and cracked from days without water. "Please," he managed to say. "I did nothing wrong. I only asked about the food rations. People were starving. I just asked questions." The tech priest did not respond. It moved to a console near the table and pressed several buttons. More machines came to life around the chamber. Mechanical arms descended from the ceiling. A tray of surgical instruments slid out from the wall. "I have a family," Kale said. His voice grew desperate. "I have a daughter. Her name is Sarah. She is only 12 years old. Please, I need to go home to her." The tech priest turned its skull face toward him. When it spoke, the voice was not human. It was the sound of metal scraping against metal, processed through ancient speakers. "Flesh is weak. You will be made strong. Your body will serve the Omnisia. This is a blessing. No, Kale said. Tears ran down his face. No, please. I am a loyal servant of the Emperor. I have committed no crime. Please, in the Emperor's name, let me go. The tech priest raised one mechanical tentacle. A needle dripped with green fluid. The Emperor requires your service. The Imperium requires your flesh. You are now property of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Subject designation, Servitor Unit 7741 Kappa. Purpose, menial labor. Consciousness, not required. The needle pierced Kale's neck. Fire spread through his veins. But the fire did not make him sleep. It made every nerve in his body wake up. He could feel everything. Every touch. Every vibration. Every molecule of air on his skin. Then the drill began to spin. Kale screamed as the tech priest brought the drill to his skull. The sound of metal cutting through bone filled his ears. He felt the pressure, then the release, then the cold air touching his exposed brain. He screamed until his throat tore. He screamed until no sound came out, but the tech priest did not stop. Mechanical fingers reached into Kale's open skull. They pushed aside gray matter. They made room for something else. Kale felt a cold metal device slide into his brain. Wires connected to nerves. Circuits fused with tissue. His thoughts began to slow down, but he tried to hold on to himself. He tried to remember who he was. His name was Kale. He was born in Hab Block 7. He worked at the docks. He loved a woman named Mira. He had a daughter named Sarah. She had brown hair. She had her mother's eyes. She liked to sing when she thought no one was listening. The memories began to fade. Another implant went in. This one was bigger. It pressed against the part of his brain that held his personality. Kale felt himself becoming smaller. The world became simple. Colors lost their meaning. Sounds became just noise. Sarah. He had to remember Sarah, but he could not remember why the name mattered. The tech priest worked for 6 more hours. It removed parts of Kale's brain that controlled independent thought. It installed circuits that would receive commands. It attached metal plates to his skull. It replaced his left arm with a mechanical limb built for lifting heavy objects. When the procedure was complete, the thing on the table was no longer Kale Moro.it was Servitor Unit 7741 Kappa. The tech priest logged the procedure in its databanks. Another successful conversion. Another unit ready for service. The flesh tithe quota for the month was now complete. The servitor's eyes were open, but they saw nothing. Its mouth hung slack. Its chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity. Deep in what remained of its brain, a single image flickered like a dying candle. A girl with brown hair and her mother's eyes. The image faded to black. On Hive Primus, 1,000 light-years away, a little girl sat by her window. She watched the cargo ships come and go. She waited for her father to come home. He never would.